come up with a lot of questions. I want us to, at the end, I don't want there to be a lack of discussion, a lack of discourse. Um, that's a big part of these learning programs is that we participate as learners in the classroom. Okay, if you are just going to sit and listen, I mean, it's all right, but it's better if you lean into the experience and you partake in it. So be a part of the experience. Don't be someone that observes the experience. Okay. So if you don't know, or don't remember, my name is Carl Tischlauser. I am the lead for this program. We did initially book a guest lecturer to do module 5, but then the lecture was double booked. So myself and some of our other internal facilitators will be stepping in to assist for this module. But for module 6 and 7, we definitely do have guest lecturers, in the lineup, ready to speak to you, ready to, make sure that your experience is diverse. And, the key thing for me is to make sure that you are not just hearing from the same people consecutively. Okay. It would have been easy for me to say, no, it's fine, I'll lecture on module 1 to 7. I've developed the content. I could have done it, but I just thought, let's make it interesting. Let's make it fun for you as a learner. So when we have the guest lecturers, I do ask that you participate. You make it because they've taken time out of their lives, out of their work, family time, all of that. They've literally taken time out of that to come and speak to you about these topics. They are also mostly subject matter experts, so they can tell you a lot of information, like they can provide you with a lot of insights. Okay. I can see that the attendance is ramping up, so we now have 18 participants. I will share the link with you, so make sure you complete the attendance register just so that we can keep record of your presence in the session. And yeah, before I commence with module 5, do you have any questions, anything we want to discuss before we delve or dive into this module? Are we all good? Just give me a thumbs up if you are. Okay. Okay, I see. Halan is okay. Asa's all good. Or you have a question? Okay, no, you're all good. Twan, you can also raise your hand. That's good. Okay. Let me see. I've only gotten 3 people. Okay, we need to all be able to participate. Yeah. The sessions are about interactivity. Okay, there we go. Marco has given me a raised hand. Mumsy, are you with me? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, Asa, yes, thank you. Okay, Rankolo, yes. Brilliant. Mumsy's hands up. Awesome. Okay. So that's all you need to do. Thumbs up, raise your hand, use the emoji thing. That lets us know how you're feeling. It's very important that you remain interactive during the sessions. And it helps us a lot as lecturers, facilitators. It makes it a lot easier. Okay, so let's delve into Module 5. Module 5 is all about HR essentials, and I'm not going to give you all the basics of HR, but HR is human resource management. And what we're trying to look at is trying to look at HR from a business advisory perspective. And we'll be looking at it, for a modern business. So we're not looking at it from traditional business, we're looking at it from a modern business lens or modern business perspective. Okay, I will just let you know what the agenda for today is. So this module has only got 2 unit standards. So it's a 7885 and then it's 116367. You'll see that the first one is to research and update legal knowledge requirements for business compliance. So it's all about that, going and looking at what legislations are out there to ensure that your organization is legally compliant. And then we're also going to be looking at the application of basic human resource practices. So we're not going to delve too deeply into that HR stuff, but we will be touching, the surface of what's there. So again, we do provide a lot of information on the slides, but just know that what we provide is not all that's out there. So you are required to go and do some research once we're done with the session. Make sure that you are getting comfortable with the knowledge, getting comfortable with the topics, and getting to know some of the terminology, some of the best practices. Okay. Uh, so module 5.1, You'll see we'll cover the following. So it's the importance of developing business compliance. So, how can businesses remain compliant? We will be talking about researching law, which is quite easy to do. We'll look at the effect that government policies have on businesses, which we'll talk about at some length. We'll look at the business environments, and I've put a lot of figures and diagrams in to demonstrate the different environments. And then we'll talk about ways to monitor and improve workplace operations. I think the monitoring and improvement of workplace operations dabbles in and touches on a lot of the things we'd previously touched on in the previous module. So if you spoke about key performance indicators, that would be one of the obvious ways to monitor and improve workplace operations. But there could be other ways of doing it. Simple observation also works. But yeah, so these are basically the things we will cover in module 5.1. The other thing, before I delve deeper into 5.1, we have tried to keep the module simple. So if you think about the work you've been doing, the assignments and stuff, it has been a lot more simpler than module 2, for example. Do you all agree? Have you noticed it, that it's been shorter, it's been quicker, it's been a lot easier? Have you seen that effort? Okay, Asta says yes. Yes. Just think about how module 4 was and then compare it to module 2. Module 2 is the biggest one. Module 3 was difficult because it's accounting. I know that. And I tried to make it as simple as possible, but it's very tricky. You can't simplify accountancy for those who are non-accountants. But yeah, okay. So let's keep going. So let's look at the first topic in 5.1. Okay, so the first one is a question. Why is compliance important? Okay, who wants to talk to me? Who's going to talk to me and tell me why? Let me see. Give me raise your hand if you want to answer. If you don't, I'll just pick someone. That's not a problem. Okay, Asa, your hands up.
Good morning, Carl, and morning to colleagues in there. I believe that compliance is very, very important because the government needs to set up some rules that we need to follow. And part of the compliance is to ensure that we do things the right way. Because if there is no monitoring and compliance for that matter, then things would not, everyone will come up with their own thing. And we won't know exactly how to do certain things. That's why we've got laws to govern
100%.
most of the things that we do so that we can refer to the rules, and then when we are going off the track, we can always come back and say, no, according to the rules, we are supposed to do things in this way. Thank you.
100% correct. Yeah. So you actually dabbled on a lot in the space of compliance. Let me see if there's anyone else who wants to share a little bit of their perspective. So, Tumi, can you talk to me? Why does compliance matter? Why is it important? Okay, so Tumi, are you with us? Okay. Let's see, maybe Mashadu can talk to us.
Okay. I think the compliance is important in the business because it reduces the risk in your business.
Okay, that's a good reason. That's 100% good reason. Okay, where do you think a lot of compliance would come from? And you don't have to answer this, Mashadu. Maybe someone else in our group can answer. Where do we think compliance comes from? And don't just think government, but what is the other thing, the key, what is at the heart of being compliant? Okay, I see we have a hand up. Shilidzi, talk to me.
Hello.
Hi there.
Morning, everybody. Well, the compliance, I think, it's important because the way on how businesses are supposed to operate, they are supposed to be in line with what the government want, how its peoples to be treated. Okay.
100%, yeah. So it's about what the government wants and how the government wants their people treated, yes? Sorry, keep going. I interrupted you.
Oh, okay. Then again, while you are a business person to be successful, there are also ways on how you are supposed to conduct yourself, which means when the government to come to monitor you, or those officials from the government come to monitor. In other words, they must also find it in line. Otherwise, the way on how you are treating people, so, or those workers as human resource, in other words, it is also supposed to be fair because at first, before they come to your company to assist you, there are peoples at first who have rights, who have their beliefs also. Then compliance, you must also try to meet what other peoples are expecting from you.
100%. 100%. Okay, thank you. Okay, so yes, a lot of what has been shared is exactly what is at the heart of compliancy. But the key word I was looking for with it was ethics. We want to operate ethically. Okay, and ethics means that we don't harm others, we don't harm the environment, and we're not manipulating a system, we're not rigging ourselves, to be in a better position at the expense of other individuals. And that's what compliance is all about. Okay, it's about remaining ethical, and it's about adopting best practices. Best practices are practices that have been predefined, that is it's strong, it's existent. And not all industries have best practices. So where you don't have best practices, you're using emergent practices, or you're developing new best practices. You're in the process of finding what works best. And it does kind of link to our conniving framework. So if you don't know that, just go and check it out. I will put the name in the chats so you can go and do a bit of a search about it. It is a Swedish model. I'm not sure if I've shared it with the group before. Asa, your hands up.
Yeah, Carl, as you were talking, I was thinking right now, because if you check, we've got a competition commissioner right now and if you look at the number of companies that are found to be inflating their prices and so on, and anti-competitive behavior, you realize that it's an issue of compliance, because they don't comply. And if we don't have someone that is looking after our interest, then everyone is just going to do whatever they want, and we're not going to gain anything out of the whole situation.
100%. Remember, that's what government's role is in compliance here. Government's there to make sure that businesses don't take advantage of people, and people don't take advantages of business. And businesses, in a sense, the system is set up so that businesses keep government in check. So like if government is non-compliant, then businesses don't invest in a country, your larger ones. But it's a big system, and it's all interlinked. But yes, when you have that, where they inflate the prices and it's unfair, that's where your government will come in to protect the individuals. That's very important. That's what we're looking for. Yeah, so that's interesting. And if you would have seen this with MTN and with Vodacom, where they were caught colluding their prices. It's a great case study for corrupt behavior and anti-compliance, because at the end of the day, the only people that suffered were the consumers, the end users. Because if MTN and Vodacom decided together to put the prices up, yeah, the only individuals that really suffer are the small market players, and then the end user, the consumer. And that's why compliance is important, so that we can protect the users, the consumers. We make sure that people are not being taken advantage of. That's the entire purpose. That's why it's important. Okay, thanks, Asa. That's for adding that value. Okay, so compliance is important because of legislation, because of rules, because of standards, policies, requirements, regulations, governance, and transparency. These are all some of the reasons. There are many, many other reasons why, but these are the key ones. These are the ones that stand out, the ones that are highlighted when you think about compliance. So when you think compliance, I want you to think legislation. I want you to think rules. I want you to think standards, governing bodies, regulations, Think about transparency. One of the key issues in compliancy is showing everything you do, showing every step of the way. That is important. That's why we want compliance. Okay. So yeah, when you think compliancy, think about the following components, the things you see on the screen. So you think about all of these items. Okay. And yeah, so as we've discussed it at length already, compliance matters because it helps us ensure that we're not violating the law, we're not breaking the law, that we're not stepping over government regulations, which is important. It also, we spoke about risks. Someone mentioned that it's important because it helps us avoid risks. Yes, compliance matters because it minimizes legal risks and potential penalties. So if we go back to the case study of MTN and Vodacom, both of those organizations were fined hefty sums. It was a couple hundred million for both of them, for colluding. And that's what happens. That you'll get fined, you'll get penalized. If you don't pay the fine, you will no longer be allowed to operate in that context, which is important. And then the big thing, the thing that sells people on government, the thing that sells people on products, services offered by private businesses is reputation. So what you want to do is you want to build trust with stakeholders. So for government, a big thing for them is if they present themselves just a little bit better, they can build better trust with South Africans, with stakeholders in general. And as a result, there's just a better relationship. And the same thing happens with businesses. If a business has been known to take advantage or rip their end user or customer off, they destroy that relationship. They'll have a bad reputation. And that is a negative thing. It means you sell less, you do less, less opportunity to grow, that sort of thing. And then also it promotes ethical behavior and corporate responsibility. Remember, CSR, corporate social responsibility, is at the heart of many organizations. And what we want to do is we want to ensure that we are not damaging the environment, we're not harming the end user, we're not harming, no one is harmed in us being there doing what we need to do. And if there is a negative result or negative outcome as a result of you doing what you do, then it must be outweighed by what you're doing. The benefits must outweigh the cons or the negative sides. So a good example of this is I found in the training and skills development space, we used to print a lot. Like you'd print so many pages, so many things, and a lot of it would be wastage. A lot of it would be thrown out. So what we did to counteract the wastage was we started recycling the paper, which is important, which helps. And then also the other thing we did to mitigate that was we also moved online. We moved to a more digital, easy to access platform to minimize printing. And to make sure that students don't have to rely on the printing so much. So you don't have to wait for your facilitator to print material and bring it to you. So us moving to the Google Classrooms, for example, was a great way to mitigate and to be more compliant. We are better for the environment as a result of doing it online the way we are. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. I have an example. So ensuring compliance in a project to secure funding as seen in your Vember community project. So this is just an example. Yeah, it's literally if you were doing something in that space, in that territory, then yeah. So the slides were developed for one of my other groups where they were doing a Vember community project, and that's why the example is relevant. I explained to them that they couldn't get funding if they weren't compliant. Like if sponsors saw them as non-compliant or unethical or if you're unable to trust them, they would lose the funding for their project. So that's why that example was relevant in that context, and it's still a good example in any other context. Okay, let us keep going. So key areas for business compliance. So these are the areas we're looking to make sure that we manage it. So it's financial reporting. Obviously, your SaaS is going to want to know what's happening, and you just want to be as transparent as possible. There mustn't be any gray areas whether you have money there and you can't justify it. It's unexplainable. Okay, that's going to be uncompliant. Okay, and then we need to make sure we are abiding by health and safety regulations. Every organization in South Africa has to have a health and safety, occupational health and safety certificate. You can't operate without it. It's a problem. It's literally just you'll get into trouble if you don't. And then we must make sure that we are following environmental laws. Dimakatso. Dimakatso. I can see she's not sitting in front of the computer. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're not damaging the environment by, doing what you're doing. You want to make sure that there's no harm, there's no negative repercussion. You've got to be cautious about that. Then we have employment and labor laws, which is, to make sure that we are employing people that their contract literally states what their role is, what they're required to do, that we're not like forcing them to work over hours or after hours, and that their environment is actually conducive to what they do. So a big thing in other contexts in other countries is like, especially for like factory workers that have kids working in the factories, that poor lighting, poor air quality, poor conditions overall, and it leads to health problems, which is what we don't want. And South Africa does a great job of protecting employees. It does a great job of protecting factory workers. It really, the legislation is there to protect them, and it's well written. Okay, what you will see is a lot of other countries will come and look at our legislation and actually just copy and paste it for theirs because it's so well written, it's so well defined. It does a very good job of protecting employees, and the labor laws are there; they work very well. Yeah, but again, when those laws and legislations are developed, it needs to, you need to find a happy middle. You can't, protect the labor so much so that it's at the expense of the employer, but you can't do it so little that it's at the expense of the employee. So you need to find a happy middle, and I think South Africa's done a very good job at doing that. Okay, and then we have data protection and privacy. Data protection and privacy is one of the more modern requirements, or more modern compliancy requirements, I should say. Okay, so when we're thinking about this, we should all be thinking one thing. What should we be thinking? What is the legislation that speaks about data protection in South Africa? Who knows this? We should all know it by now. Okay, Asa, your hands up.
And I think it's the POPI Act.
100%. The Protection of Personal Information Act, POPIA. Okay, if you didn't know that, I'd highly recommend that you do some research because that has been set into place to protect your data, your personal information. Okay, these devices we use and we depend on every day. Sorry, I don't know where the camera is. It's not showing. Yeah, there's my phone. These devices we depend on every day. It violates a lot of these data protection things, and that's why South African legislation has had to accommodate that. So your mobile device will track where you are, will listen to everything you say, and you have to actually now accept those terms. Every time you accept the T's and C's, that's what you're agreeing to. But that's what data protection laws have come into that's why they've come into the fold, into the mix, to make sure that people and their information is being protected. That's important. Okay. Tumi, I see you put your camera on. You seem a little distracted. Okay, cool. Yeah, so hi there. What is the other key measure or key data protection instrument that is used, especially when you are taking out some sort of contract? What is the thing that they have to do? Does someone want to tell me? Asser, I know you've answered a lot, so maybe let's allow someone else.
I just wanted to ask a question
Okay.
based on, yeah.
Ask away.
Regarding the data protection and privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say what is happening with regards to our data that is being sold to people that will call us every day in terms of the insurances and trying to sell us that and that. What is our recourse when it comes to that?
So when you receive a call from an insurance broker or whoever's trying to sell you some sort of product, you can ask them to delete your data. You can ask them to remove it from their database, and they have to respect that because it is your data. But you must also remember that every time you sign up for something, so for example, if I decide to create a macro account, I'll sign up and they'll get my details, and then I'll agree to the terms and conditions. And if you don't read the T's and C's, you will miss it. But in the T's and C's, you basically give them the right to sell your data. And then they will sell it, and then it will be used by other marketers to sell you other products. And I find it often when I bought a car, a year ago. After I purchased the vehicle, I got so many calls from insurance companies trying to sell me insurance for the vehicle. And that's what they do. They literally take your data and they sell it. I get SMSs every day for insurance. Yeah, so that's what they do. The only thing you can really do, the only recourse you have is to ask them to remove your data, to remove your information from their database.
Okay,
And
because
sometimes, yeah, sorry.
what I've realized, sorry to interject, what I've realized in most instances, you find that there is no clause that is saying can they sell your, or they send you marketing materials, because some companies will ask you if you agree for them to distribute your details to other marketers, but others don't have that.
Yeah,
So
so what they're doing is they're getting away with it by not stating it. If they don't
yeah,
state it explicitly, they can say that it was implied, and then they can get away with it, which is a problem. That's what they do.
okay,
It's very smart. It's very,
yeah,
very smart. Yeah. But you can always
thank you.
just ask the broker, whoever's contacting you, to remove your data from their database, and they have to respect that.
All
Okay.
right,
Yeah.
thank you.
No problem. Okay, so what is the other thing that happens when you take out a contract? They have to do something. What is this thing they do? Does anyone know? I should pick on the conveners a little. Yeah. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna pick someone and see if they know. So when you go, for example, and you take out a cell phone contract, there's something that the salesperson at the shop will do, and they require certain documents. What is this process that I'm referring to? Okay, it seems like not many of us know. I see we have Paul Brenda. Maybe you can talk to me. Okay, nothing from Paul. Okay, Mr. Mabaso, I see you in the session. Oh, there we go. Cornelius.
Yes, Carl. Good morning again, once again.
Good
Is it
morning
not
again.
the process of verifying your address, FICA processes?
Yes, it's 100%. I'm looking for the FICA process. And the reason why the FICA process is important is because it's meant to stop other individuals from taking out contracts in your personal name. And it's typically a very effective deterrent, but not always the best. Okay, I'll give you an example. So I have, and this is a little bit of an anecdote, personal story. I have an older brother, and he worked for Vodacom for a while, and he was able to take out contracts in my mom's name because he worked there. But often when those things are violated, when FICA is violated, or even RICO, or whatever they call it, they have different names for it in different places. When it's violated, it often would be the internal staff members who violated the practice and the policy. But yeah, those things are set in place for a very specific reason. It's there to make sure that no one's taking out contracts without your permission, because it's your name. You're going to be held accountable for any debt that is incurred on that account. Okay. Yeah, so let us keep going. These are just the key areas of requirements or the key areas of business compliance. I hope that it makes sense. I hope that we can all agree that these are the key areas. Okay. So I did give some more examples. So for financial reporting, we're looking for accuracy in financial statements. We're looking for compliance with accounting standards. So my best recommendation, best suggestion is to avoid doing accountancy if you're not an accountant. Okay, get an expert to do it. So when it comes to like doing taxes and filing your financial statements and whatnot with SARS, make sure that you get an expert to do it, because if you make a mistake, you will be held liable and you will be held accountable for it. Whereas if it is an accountant that can justify it, they probably know a way out of it, or they will be held accountable and they have to deal with the costs incurred. Okay. Then we have health and safety regulation, which is what I spoke about. It's all about creating a safe work environment, which is what we're looking for. And it's being compliant with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration standards. Okay, that is very important. We want to make sure that the environment that your employees are working in are safe for them to work in. And this is not just about physical safety, but even air quality, psychological safety. All of these things need to be considered. We want to make sure that the environments are safe for the employees. Okay. There's more. So we have environmental laws, so adhering to regulations on waste disposal and emission. So you can't just take an old computer and throw it out. It's a violation of the environmental laws. There are certain ways to dispose of certain technologies. And if you put it in the trash, it will go to the I forgot what they're called, but it's literally a waste yard, where it's just it doesn't break down. It actually just becomes a negative thing for the environment. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to promote sustainable practices. So you're not just thinking about your generation, and you're not just thinking about the next generation, but you're thinking about 4 generations down the line. What kind of country, what kind of world are we going to leave for those individuals that will take over from us once we're done, with our part in the world, with our roles? Okay. Then we're looking at employment and labor laws, so fair hiring practices, so making sure that you manage employees effectively, that the contracts are there, and then also adhering to minimum wage laws and working conditions. So the working conditions would tie in to our health and safety regulations, but it is something that is also considered with your labor law practices. Okay. And then also we have data protection. So we did speak about PAPIA, and other similar laws, but it's just making sure that we are data secure. Okay. Remember that if you have a database of people's personal information, if that personal information leaks, you are liable for that leak. And there will be costs incurred for that kind of leak. So that's why it's very important to make sure you have firewalls, that you have data protection software, protecting the personal information of those using your platform, those using your devices, those who are interacting with you in the business context, or even in any other context. Okay. Let us keep moving. So now we want to talk about research, and this research is more about research in law and legislation. So we're going to start with a quote. It's a quote from an unknown individual, but the quote literally says, "Compliance is not a policy or procedure. It's a culture that runs deep within an organization, fostering trust and integrity with every action." Okay, and that's what it is. That's what we're encompassing. It's not a policy. You can develop policies and procedures until the cows come home. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Policy is just a piece of paper. The thing that really matters is what we do in the environment. It's how we act. It's how we behave. And that's why this quote makes sense. That's why I'm saying it's a culture. It's a decision we make at every turn, because every business decision we have is left or right. It's either going to be the right thing or the wrong thing to do. Sometimes it's difficult to tell. Sometimes it's a little foggy, unclear, but you try to do your very best to do or take the path that will be the least harmful to those involved. And that's what you should be thinking. That's why it's a culture that runs deep in an organization. Okay. You want to make sure that you're fostering trust, and that your organization becomes known for being, having integrity, for doing what they say. That's why it's a big deal for me, especially with our program, with this project, the BA Level 6 one that we're doing, that when we say we're going to have class, we have the class. When we say we're going to do things, we do them. Okay, that's why giving out the prizes and whatnot is very important to me, because it means I said we're going to get prizes, you will get prizes. Okay, I did mention earlier we're a little bit delayed. The assessors are busy going through. Once the assessors have confirmed the results, we can start issuing prizes. I hope before this weekend we will do so. Okay, so the work just needs to be checked before we can issue those prizes. But it will happen. It has happened before. It will keep happening. If you don't know how the prizes work for the program, it's normally students who get the top result in every group. That you are grouped into 4 groups. So students who get the top result in their respective group will get a prize. There's no prizes for coming second. There's no prizes for third, unfortunately. Okay, we live in a world with limited resources and unlimited wants and desires. So we've had to, find a middle ground. And our middle ground was to ensure that top performers in each respective group gets a little prize. Okay, but let us keep going. Let us keep going. So the importance of researching law cannot be understated. It's very important that you do your research, and you do so regularly. Okay. You need to understand that every industry, every business industry will have different legislation or different legal requirements. And that's important, because legislation will have to, be flexible to accommodate different industries. Not every industry is the same. Not every industry will have the same requirements. Some of the stuff is a blanketed approach, which means it could be applied across the board. Other things need to be applied specifically to industries. Okay, so think about the medical field. There are certain things you can and can't do. Okay, for example, there's a DNR band that you can wear. I don't know if you know what a DNR band is. A DNR band says do not resuscitate, which means if a patient is unconscious or stops breathing, the medical doctor cannot resuscitate, cannot bring them back to life. And That's a law, it's a legislation, it's in place. And that is specific to the medical space. It's if they put that as a law in the let's say in education, if they just said, yeah, if a student is wearing a DNR band, you cannot resuscitate them. How relevant is it? How often is it that a teacher's got to resuscitate a student? It's really it's far and few. It's not a real thing. So yeah, it wouldn't make sense to put that in as a legislation. And that's why you need to understand the legal requirements, related to your industry. Um, the other thing is these things get updated often. Okay, there are reworks, revisions all the time. And the reason why there are reworks because we live in a VUCA world. The world is continuously changing, continuously moving. Just the other day, we went into a world where we had to wear masks. Just the other day, we went into a world where we didn't have to wear the masks anymore. And you can see that the world changes, it moves. We never stay still. So for that reason, legislation and law has to keep being revised, has to keep being updated to make sure that it's applicable to the world that we live in. So that's why you, as an individual who wants to be a business advisor, you need to make sure that you're constantly following the legislative updates. Because it will have an impact. It has an impact on your organization, it has an impact on how you will advise an organization to make sure that you know what's happening in that space. It's very informative to business strategies and decisions you make. You can't make decisions if you don't understand the full picture. Legislation tells us or gives us parameters that we can operate within. So if you know the space you're allowed to operate in, you can then, there make decisions that benefit an organization, decisions that can, enhance or further develop a strategy that a business might have. And then we've mentioned this before, it does also reduce risks. It could take away a lot of legal disputes that might, pop up. And it could also avoid you having to deal with compliance breaches, which is a very important thing in the space of compliancy. Okay. And then we're looking at connecting your role to developing implementation plans and leading others effectively. Remember, as a business advisor, you need to be able to get the full picture. And it's very important to know where you can go and where you can't go. So if you're a business leader or an individual that's leading others, you can't lead people, into the flames, into the fire. You need to make sure you're protecting them and doing what's in the best interest of them and the organization. So, that's why it's important. You need to know what you can and can't do as a leader. Okay. So these are just the importance of this is just the importance of researching laws and legislation. Let us keep going. So if you wanted to, go and actually do the research, here are some steps you can follow. So step one would be to identify the relative laws and regulations. So not all of it will be related to you and your specific industry. So make sure that you've decided what the focus is and go and look specifically in that area. And then you need to consider local, national, and international laws. So there aren't laws that are specifically developed per region. There are also other laws that are national, so that would be for the whole country of South Africa. And then you also have international laws that every country in the world has to abide by. So, consider all of these different things. Okay. So yeah, I'll give you an example. So we had in Joburg, so in Gauteng, we had our tolls, our e-tolls, and that was more it would be considered local. It wasn't really nationally rolled out. Yeah, and then another one would be for national. One of our national legislations would be that we, for example, would have to pay tax. That's a national thing. It's rolled out. It's a blanketed approach. And then international laws would be, for example, if an international criminal is wanted or whatever, South Africa would have to work with Interpol. They don't always do, but that could be an example of how it would work. Just yeah. There are also other things. So when we had COVID-19, it was more an international thing than it was a local or national thing. It had a national and local impact, but it was an international, it was a big thing that had an impact on all the other spaces, which we will talk about the other environments. Okay. Step two would be to actually, consult legal databases and resources. So you can utilize online legal databases. A good example, a good one to go to the Legal Wise. I think they're brilliant. And then also you can review government websites for updates. So looking at the gazettes, reading them, understanding them, seeing how you can implement and enforce them. Sometimes the gazettes are very simple. They give you step-by-step ways you can implement the legislation being discussed in that respective gazette. Other times it can be really complicated, and you might need an expert. Okay, so I've seen some of the stuff can be really overcomplicated, and then sometimes it can be oversimplified. It just depends who was writing it, who developed that particular legislation. Okay, and then you want to also look at case law and legal precedents. So if you're in a space that's gray, there isn't a yes or no answer. You can always look at previous decisions that were taken, that are related to your organization. And then you can also understand the implications of legal precedent. So looking at what happened before and what happened as a result of that happenings, the cause and effect relationship between what happened in a court of law and what happened in the real world. So that would be step 3. So, just analyzing case law and legal precedents. Okay, step 4 would be seeking professional advice. So there's no harm in going and asking an expert who knows that the legislation. There are individuals that just specialize in certain laws and certain things, and you can literally go and ask them. It probably would be worth the time spent, and it might cost you less than making a mistake, which is very important. You want to avoid being fined. You want to avoid all of these negative repercussions, and that might just cost you less. Like speaking to an expert might cost you less than what it would to make a mistake. Okay, Male Watle.
I'm going to just go to Teams.
Hi, sorry. You're unmuted. Do you want to talk to me? Can you hear me? Do you want to share something? Okay, so the rule of thumb is going to be if you are unmuted, you have to share something. Okay, what do you want to tell me? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to keep going. Please don't interrupt the session. Monitor your mic. Okay. Okay, cool. Let us keep going. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the business environments. So to kickstart the business environment section, I have a quote from Tom Coughlin, and he says that success is best when it's shared. Compliance ensures that we play by the rules, maintaining fairness and trust in all our business relationships, which is a nice quote. It's nice, clean, it's simple, and it literally at the heart, it just says success is best when it's shared. When we're working well with others, and it's also it's nicer when you haven't had to take advantage of other individuals to get that success. Okay. It's when we are playing by the rules, we're trying to be as fair as possible, and we have trust in the relationships that we've built. Okay. So here are some examples of policy and how it might impact the business. So, for example, tax incentives for renewable energy investments. So, government, for example, if they're trying to solve energy crises and stuff like that, they could incentivize private individuals, by giving them tax tax rebates, tax cutoffs, for investing in renewable energy. So for paying for solar, water, electricity, those sort of things. They could also give them money back for putting back into the grid. That sort of thing we've seen a lot of. Yeah, so it's just encouraging sustainable business practices, and then also allowing for financial benefits for adopting greener technologies. This is just an example how a government policy can have a positive impact on the real world and on business. Okay, there could also be changes in labor laws, which would impact on hiring and workforce management, and then also would have compliance with new regulations to avoid penalties. An organization would probably change how they how they approach their labor and how they manage their employees, and that could be as a result of an update in labor law. Okay, I see that there's a comment from Malawate. Let me see. Okay, that's fine. I'm glad you could join. I just we mustn't interrupt because some of our colleagues have been on from the beginning, so we mustn't disrupt the session by having our mic on. Okay, let us keep going. So then we have environmental regulations. So it's ensuring sustainable operation. It's avoiding fines and enhancing corporate social responsibility. So it's making sure that the practices we have are not harmful. Okay, and it's so easy to have practices that are bad for the environment. So don't step into that trap. Try and avoid it as much as possible. It could cost you a lot of money in the long run. Okay. Then we have trade tariffs. So, these often affect the businesses that import and export. And it could mean that products are more expensive. It could mean that products are more cheap. So think about things like Temu, for example. They recently had a change in legislation that impacted them. So at some point, I think you were paying, was it 20% tax on anything you brought in through Temu? And then South African clothing retailers complained about it because they were paying 45% plus VAT on their imports, and they felt like it wasn't fair. So government had to amend their policy, and now you pay roughly about the same on Temu as what you would on the same as going to like the shops and buying it there. But I guess also the thing about Temu is you're buying from factories. Okay, whereas your clothing retailers in South Africa buy from factories and then put it on a shelf and charge even more. So it's a muchness thing. But then also the trade tariffs, you have to adapt to changing international trade policies. So you know that a lot of countries have relationships and governments work with each other. And if there's a good relationship between the country and its governments, often they would minimize the trade tariffs. They would encourage, the trade to happen. That sort of thing is very important. I don't see enough of it in the South African context. Okay, Asa, your hands up.
Thank you, Carl. Just interrupting you in that effect. There is this trade agreement that we had with other 53 nations. You know about it, and if so, can you explain how is it going to benefit us? Like, does that mean that, for instance, I can go to Botswana and buy something there and come back to South Africa, or go to Swaziland and buy something or sell something there? I don't know. Can you just give clarity on that? Thank
Okay,
you.
so that trade policy in particular, I do not know about. Is it a trade policy with the other African countries?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was signed, I think it was signed last year, somewhere last year, where they
Okay.
said all the African countries will be trading with each other. So I don't know how is that going to happen.
How long do you think it's going to last? Because I don't think it's going to last. I'm just hearing it and I'm already thinking of loopholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there is a country, let's imagine Egypt, for example, because Egypt is African. A lot of people, the Egyptians deny it, but we think they are. Yeah. So imagine if Egypt had a good relationship with China and they decided to have minimal tariffs for me to import into Egypt. So what I would do then is, as a South African, is I'd just go to Egypt, I'd order all my goods, have it imported, and then just have it shipped down to South Africa. And just like that, I've avoided paying whatever the South African tariff might be. But I mean, I can imagine that maybe they have some sort of restriction or regulation for that, but I don't think it's going to last. I don't think it's going to work. I'm not sure.
But
I haven't.
but
Yeah,
okay.
go
On
for it.
that, if you look at our tariffs in terms of the trade tariff, don't you think that they are influenced by the big companies that are protecting their own interests so that they can be able to monopolize the whole industry with regard to, for instance, cars or a clothing department as such? Because, like the example that you just gave about them, it was actually making things easier for even people that cannot really afford to go to your normal store and get things. And so for me, it is competitive. They just need to come up with ideas as to how they can counter that rather than protecting the market.
Yeah, I also think that they should allow certain things to happen. I don't like if the consumer benefits ultimately, like your large retailers can't complain that the consumers found a cheaper alternative. It just means that the large retailer must actually bring their prices down to compete. But government protects them, and there are incentives, there are reasons. So you know that your large retailer will come to South Africa and say, "We'll open our shops in SA." And that is an investment in the country. So you have to protect us. And the large retailer will hire employees, in the South African context. Whereas if we're importing from China, directly from China, they don't hire as many employees as a large retailer will. At most, they might have delivery guys guys and girls that are South African, but the rest is just Chinese. And that doesn't benefit the South African economy. Okay. The other thing is if we're buying overseas, our money is leaving the country, which is not good for South Africa. South Africa wants to keep the money in circulation as much as possible. Yeah. As long as the money is circulating, yeah, it's being taxed continuously. It's a continuous loop of tax, yeah, tax there, tax, which means government is, able to get some tax out of it. If it leaves the country immediately, it just gets taxed in another country. So it's lost. Which is a problem. So that's why they have very strict controls over all of it. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. But the thing is, they should be looking at the models that those guys are using, because that will benefit the consumer in the long run. Because the main thing is not to be greedy about creating wealth. I know that you are in a business to make money, but it needs to. You must also put in the ethics in your business dealings with. And look at the economic measures that people that you are selling to, because
yeah.
Yeah, because in most cases, when I look at things, they are not. We are not balancing, and we are not learning from. If we've got so many people that are creating jobs within the country, and then they are reasonable, that goes down to the consumer who will benefit because the prices will cancel each other out. Like for instance, when you look at the price of petrol, it's just across the board, it's expensive. And if you were to have different consumers put their prices there, then we'll have a competitive market in there. And as a
100%.
result, yeah, so
No,
that's
I
my
I agree with
contribution.
you. And I think also
Yeah.
looking at models that were developed in other countries and seeing how you can apply them in our context, for example, it could drive up our economic performance. It could drive up our GDP. I don't know if you know that in China they have a very unique approach to how they do imports and exports. Does anyone know how they do it in China? Has anyone ever seen anything about it or read anything about it? Okay.
I do not know.
Okay, Ashley says you don't know. Okay, if you haven't heard about it, give me a thumbs up or raise your hand. 'Cause I'm about to share something really interesting with you. Um, for those of us who don't know. So if you don't know, if you've never heard of it, just raise your hand or give me a thumbs up. Let's see. I just want to see where the group stands. Okay, interesting. We have one. Okay. Okay, this question also goes out to the conveners. You're welcome to raise your hand, give me a thumbs up. It's very important that you partake. There's no point in sitting in the session and doing nothing. Okay, awesome. Okay, so I will explain it. So in China, they have a very different approach to how they do imports and exports. So in China, you can't just export your goods from anywhere in the country. Okay, you have to go to what is called it's a special economic zone or a special economic hub. They call them SEZs. And these are literal parts that have become massive cities. But if you live in that area, if you work in that area, you can export your goods. And the goods can only be exported and imported from that specific place or region. If you're not in that region, you're not allowed to. And by doing that, China has literally created these little areas where they've become overpopulated because a lot of people have moved to those spaces, to export their goods. But what they've done is they can now control what's leaving the country and what's going in. And they've limited the amount of goods that are being, pushed out. And they've also, because they've created these hubs where things are being pushed out, are being sold, being traded, they are now, they have a lot more other spaces that they've converted to factories that were initially open, but now are being literally factory hubs. But that's one of the things they've done. They've created hubs where you can trade. And if you're not in that hub, you're not allowed to trade. In South Africa, you can typically trade anywhere. And it also means you can import anywhere, which is just an open gate for anything coming in and out. With them, they're very strict about it. They want you to rather buy locally as opposed to import anything. And you'll see that the only thing that they rarely import would be some luxury brands and maybe some vehicles, but everything else is mostly just manufactured there. I don't know if it's a call to South Africa. Maybe South Africa should become a manufacturing country. We should start manufacturing things. But the way that China's also gotten away with some of the stuff is they didn't have the best employee regulations. So if I go back to labor law right here, they didn't set any labor laws into place, which means you had certain factories that had kids working in them. And they also don't really think about sustainability the way that a lot of other countries do. So you'll have kids working in factories and they'll also be harmful to the environment. So they'll have toxins, they'll have all sorts of other things. So as their model is very smart with the SEZs, but some of the implications, the cost of operating that way has also been very negative for the environment and for the people involved. So there's a cost for it. There's a cost at operating that way. Okay. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share about that. If you want, you can always go and do some more research about these SEZs. I will put it in the chat so you can go Google it for China. Okay, I can see that it's 10 o'clock. How do we feel about a quick 10-minute break just to get some coffee or tea? Are we all okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Asa. Is everyone else okay? Give me a thumbs up if you are. I see
Yes.
Kalan is. Okay, Mashadu, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I get so much reactions when it's for coffee and tea. When I ask a serious question, it's I've got to pull teeth. No, it's fine. I'm just gonna make every question about coffee and tea, and then we'll be fine. Okay, so I'll set the timer, and then we will. Mashadu?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna put the timer on 10 minutes. Okay, enjoy. Hi, everyone. We're back. Sorry, am I late? Hope I'm just a few seconds late. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Zona. Let me just add the link. Someone has requested the register link. There is the link. Okay, awesome. Are we all back? Just give me a thumbs up if you're ready to continue. Okay, Halane, Tuwane. Okay, brilliant. Let us keep going then. I'm going to put down some hands so that we can just focus on moving on. Okay, cool. Brilliant. Let us move on to the next thing then. Okay, so it's very important to also come to terms with the fact that we operate and we work in different environments. So the business environment is very important as for a business advisor to have a good understanding of, to come to terms with and to be comfortable with. Okay, so just remember that your internal environment would have internal factors, and these internal factors include the company culture. So how do we behave as an organization? What are the traditions we have? What are the things we value? Those are corporate cultures, what we're referring to, and it's all about building a positive, conducive work environment. Okay. The other thing which would strongly be included in this environment would be employee skills and capabilities. So what are the skills? What are the things that make us strong? What are the things that make us shine through as individuals and employees? And then operational efficiency. So how good are we at streamlining processes, for better outcomes? How efficient are we as an organization? Okay. Then we have your external environment, which would be the environment outside of the business, and this would include market conditions. So are we currently in a recession? Are we in a boom? What is happening in the market space? Okay, is it conducive to businesses doing well? Then we have economic trends, so adapting to economic changes and fluctuations. So remember, the economy doesn't stay the same. The economy is its own, like it's a living organism. It moves, it changes, it shifts. It's against you, it's for you. It's that kind of thing. So you just have to, know that it's its own living being, and it has an impact on your business. Okay. Then you have your technological advancements. So these are, AI, technology, all of those advancements. If you want, I can do a demo on some tech I found. I think you'll find it interesting, where you can have AI software that talks, and you won't be able to tell the difference, between that software and it being a human being. I was doing a demo on this the other day. Okay, and then we have trade tariffs. So, these are things that affect imports and exports, especially if that's what your business relies on. And that's just, adopting or adapting to changing international trade policies. Okay, and these are all external factors. This diagram best depicts the different environments, and it even gives you the labels. So you'll see that in the middle, we have our micro, and the microenvironment includes individual parts or individuals, and then also smaller groups, so departments in an organization. And this is often contained systems. So these are systems that are internal. These are like internal processes, procedures, those sort of things. And then we have our meso, which is your medium system. So it's a community or an organization. It gets a little bit bigger than that. And then your macro is your large systems. So educational systems, political systems, international policy systems, all of that falls into the macro space. But it's very important that you get comfortable with these three different terminologies because there are different environments that we operate in. And if you didn't know that what they were called, this is what they're called. Okay, it's very important. It sets that context. It's very informative in terms of where we are and what we're doing. Okay. So I do have some more on the macro. So components of the macro environment would include PESTL. If you can see, if you just follow this PESTL or PESTEL. Sometimes I go PESTLE, so to switch these two around. But it's political factors, economical factors, social factors, technological factors, environmental factors, and legal factors. Okay, your political factors would include your government policy, stability in the country. Are people rioting? Are they unhappy? Think about what happened in KZN, for example, when they had the riots. It was quite scary. I mean, it had an impact on business. It had an impact on meso and micro environments. Then we have economic factors. So is there growth? what is inflation rates at, and what is the exchange rate? Because all of these things come to the forefront. They get in the mix and they muddy things up. Then you have your social factors. So what are the demographics? So, South African demographics are a bit wild. We have such a wide array of individuals, and that needs to be considered too. Okay, Asta, your hands up again. What do you want to talk to me about?
Just wanted to add on the economic forecast that you highlighted, that one of the things that have really affected most countries right now is the fight that is happening in Russia and Ukraine. It affected a lot of countries in terms of. I didn't know that we are relying on grain that is produced in Ukraine. So as a result of that war, that has created a lot of problems with pricing in terms of the food that or the grain that we get from overseas.
100%. It's also what you're talking about, Asra, is understanding that every action, every cause has an effect. So if we, for example, don't get oil, it might have an effect on fuel prices, which then has. Sindisiwa? 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 Sindisiwa, you're unmuted. Sindisiwa? You were unmuted. You must talk to me now. What do you want to add to the conversation? Okay. Sindisiwa? Okay, I'll just continue. Please don't do that. That's it's very rude. It kind of interrupts the flow. Yeah. So as I was saying, it's understanding that there's a cause and effect. So if you understand that if we have an oil shortage and that affects the fuel in the country, it will have an impact on the cost of travel, which means there's a cost of transport, which means the cost of food prices go up, and that's the cause and effect in essence. As things cost a lot more because of these larger things that happen, and it ripples down into into our food baskets in the shopping centers. Okay. Then we have our social factors. So in South Africa, we have a wide array of different demographics, different types of people living throughout the country. And it's unfair to say that two people are truly alike in this context. Everyone is so unique, so individual. Everyone has their own culture, their own beautiful thing that's going on. And that needs to be appreciated. That needs to be acknowledged and seen for what it is. Yeah, so what I wanted to say about the demographics is what we're seeing is the culmination of a wide array of different cultures coming together in the workplace. Okay, sorry, who's unmuted again? Okay, please manage your mics. Okay, manage your mics. Don't interrupt the class. Okay. And there are many social issues that still need to be resolved, especially in the South African context. There are many things that are unresolved, but time will help rectify that. Time heals all these wounds, so it will get better. The social issues that are rampant or causing issues in the workplace will be dealt with at some point. But you just have to give it time as one of those things. Then we have technological factors, so you're able to use technology to be innovative in your approach. You're able to use technology to show off some cool capabilities. I will show you a tool that I like to use, and it's a very simple tool. I'll even give you a link to it. I think it's very cool. I was showing my team this yesterday. And then we have our environmental factors. So this includes sustainability, the environment itself. We're looking at ecological impacts. And that's also a big thing that needs to be considered in South Africa. South Africa has a wide array of special plant species, special animals, and those things need to be protected. And that needs to be considered. I've seen that government is very strict about it. So if there's a rare plant that is on a piece of land, they won't allow you to build or they won't allow you to do anything. They'll actually impose heavy restrictions to stop you from moving or transposing those plants because it could negatively affect their life. or their lifespan, which is very important, for that. Then we have legal factors, which you've spoken about quite a bit. So we have laws, regulations, legal frameworks, all of these things we've touched on already. I have a slide that depicts this environment a little bit better, but I will go to it. Let me go ahead. So it's the pestle. So you'll see that under P, we have government policies, political stability, corruption. These are all the same things we've already discussed. E, you have your economic growth, exchange rates, interest rates, inflation rates, disposable income. Remember, disposable income for a country is it's the amount of money we have to spend. It's money that we can spend on whatever we want. And this is after tax, after all our things are basically paid for. It's a very important figure. Unemployment rates is a big thing in South Africa, and that is something that exists in that space. Under social, we have population growth, we have age distributions. So how many young people do we have? How many old people? I think that South Africa's found a good balance between young and old. If you look at places like China, and I know today probably sounds like I'm obsessed with China, but if you look at places like China, they have a little bit of an age problem. So majority of their population is older in age, they're 40s, 50s. That's where most of the demographic sits. And it's a problem because it means in the next, let's say 30 to 40 years, that those demographics will start diminishing, which means the Chinese population will shrink quite fast. And those are things that need to be considered. Then we have your safety emphasis, you have health consciousness, you have lifestyle attitudes, cultural barriers that need to be overcome. Under T, we have technology, you have level of innovation, automation is becoming a big thing. We have research and development activities, you have technological change. Think about how the world has changed in the last 10 years. Think about how it's changed in the last 15 years. I think about 15 years ago, we were using Blackberries, Now we use phones that don't have a single button on the face, nothing on the screen. Think about how technology's moved and it keeps moving. It has an impact on the environment. Okay, and then under environment itself, we have weather, climate, you have environmental policies, climate change, which is a big thing, and then pressure from non-governmental organizations. Okay, then under legal, we have discriminatory laws, we have antitrust laws, employment laws, consumer protection laws, copyright and patent laws, and then health and safety laws. Literally everything legislative related will fall under the legal component. And you'll note that most legislation comes from government, which means it's outside of organizations, outside of the business, and it's that way for a very good reason. Okay, let me go back to the slides I skipped. So we looked at the components of the macro environment already. Let's look at the components of the meso environment. So the meso environment includes industry norms. So what are the standards? What are the best practices? What are the competitive dynamics? When we're talking about competitive dynamics, the businesses should ask themselves, who are their biggest competitors? Who are they competing against? And then best practices refer to what are the things that we do because it works. We know it works. There's no doubt about it. There's no question about it. Okay. And then standards. So what are the standards? These are normally marked or demarked by benchmarking practices. So standards are things that we need to uphold. So for example, if you were to purchase a laptop, for example, it is normal, it's given that your laptop must come with a screen. That's the standard. If there isn't a screen, you haven't bought a laptop. That's the kind of thing. Okay. If you buy a car, for example, okay, the standard is that the car will come with windows and tires. If it doesn't have the windows or tires, it's not up to standard. You've bought the frame of a car, you haven't bought a vehicle. You don't have the complete thing. And that's what standards are. Those are industry norms. Those are the expectations. Okay. Then you have regional economic conditions. So these are local market trends. Sometimes you'll notice that in a little nook or cranny of the world, something is just like trending. Something is a big deal. And that is a local market trend. Okay, as there's something that individual youth in this one region is obsessed with, and you can see the products are selling as a result. Okay, you also have your employment rates, which have an impact. If people are unemployed, they're not really contributing to taxes. They're not contributing to society, and it's not. I don't mean it in a negative way. It just means that government and society has to help carry these individuals, and it has a negative impact on economic stability. Okay, which is our next point, economic stability. So how stable is the economy? Is money flowing? In South Africa, we had a weird thing happen a couple years ago where there just wasn't enough South African rands in circulation, which meant government had to print more money, which is fine. They normally do that, but it does devalue the currency every time they print. But it was a weird thing. It was like someone who'd saved a lot of money had just taken the money out. But yeah, these things happen, and you can't really prove it. You just notice it in how the economy is performing. Okay. Then we have local regulations, you have incentives, you have support programs. So these are regional policies, and these could be specific to regions. So as I said, in certain regions, there are like plant species and animal species that you can't touch, you can't be involved with. And that's important. Okay. And then you also have your local support programs. So feeding schemes, any of those things would fall into that space. And that's important too. Then we have trade associations. So your industry groups, networks, collaborations, all of that comes into that space. Also when you think trade associations, think about trade unions also. They're very important. They play a pivotal role. A lot of countries don't have trade unions or don't allow it. South Africa does. So it's very important that we have that and we utilize those. Okay, then we have our microenvironment. And this microenvironment I'm referring to is the business environment. Okay. It refers to employees, so their skills, their attitudes, productivity. And then we have customers. So your customers are very important because, they give us they give us money, they have needs, they have preferences, and they're loyal to certain brands. It's very important that we cater to them so that they remain loyal. And their loyalty is fickle. They can switch on a dime. They'll move to the best thing as soon as they find it. Okay. Then we have suppliers. So your relationship with suppliers are very important. They need to be reliable. So are they going to deliver when they do? What happens if they're late? What is the delay? And then also, what are their costs to supply you with the things you need? Because there is a markup. And is it cheaper to just go directly to the factory, or is it still better to get the supplier to deal with all the logistics of it? And then you have competitors. Competitors are actually, in my personal opinion, I think they're the most important stakeholder, after customers. So customers would be up there, suppliers would be right below them. Sorry, competitors would be right below them. And the reason why I rate competitors so highly is because their actions have an implication for you or your organization. What the competitor does has an impact on you. And they might force you to do things that you don't want to do, but you do it because you want to remain competitive. And that's important. That's why they're very important. Okay. Then we have other stakeholders. This is just people who have an interest in a business's activity. They also have influence in the business, and they want to be engaged by said organization. So it's very important that we understand that these are all the components of the microenvironment. Okay, you can see that I'm painting a picture. So we have our micro environment, we have our meso environment, and then we have our macro environment. And these are just the different business environments. You'll see in our macro, we have the large systems, meso, we have the medium systems, and then micro, we have our contained internal organizational systems. Okay, that's very important. That's what this is all about. Okay, let us keep going. So a good way to analyze these environments is to just stick to the things that are simple. So I always advocate for using SWOT analysis because it's so easy to apply. And if you just take the SWOT analysis and you add these additional layers to it, you can really get a lot of information from it. So you'll see that if we just add the internal, external, we'll be able to tell whether we're looking outside of the organization or whether we're looking, within it, so inside of it. So you'll see that strengths and weaknesses often refer to the internal environment, which would be our meso environment. Okay. And then when we look at the external, so opportunities and threats, we often are referring to So strengths and weaknesses would be our microenvironment. Our opportunities and threats is external, so it would refer to the macro or even the meso environment. Okay. And then you'll see that if we've divided it one step further, we found that the strengths and opportunities are helpful to organization, while the weaknesses and threats are harmful. And just by creating that clear division line, we're able to see what we're working with, and then we're able to see what we're working against, which is important as a business analyst. Okay. Then this I've depicted, I've explored it, so I'm just going to keep moving past it. This is another important theory when it comes to analyzing the environments, and this is called Porter's 5 forces. So if you Google Porter's a well-known author, and he develops a lot of business theory, business models that you can use and apply. Some of them have been tried and tested. Some of them he's developed with businesses in mind. But Porter says that if you work in these environments, you need to focus on these 5 key things. Okay, the first thing he says you need to focus on is new entrants. So who are the new players in the market space? And the reason why Porter says you need to focus on these new entrants is because these new entrants always come with new things. They come with new creative approaches, new innovation, new ideas. If you're ignoring them, they'll out-innovate you. And they will, take your market. They'll steal the market from you. Your market cap, you'll lose it. Because those new entrants have a better product. They're more innovative. If you just keep an eye on them from the beginning, you might be able to do what they're doing with your existing client base, which means you can keep your client base and you've been able to innovate your product or service. Okay. The other thing that Porter says is you need to look at suppliers' power, So your suppliers are often your lifeline, because they provide you with the goods you need to do what you do. So if you're not managing them, you're not carefully monitoring that relationship, then it will be a problem. Okay. I see we have a hand. Asa, talk to me.
I just wanted to add on what you just said with regard to the new entrants, because I've seen a trend whereby, for instance, these big companies, when they see new entrants coming up with the product that will challenge them, they normally buy that product, that company out, and then continue doing its services. So that really shows that they are paying attention to everything that is threatening their existence.
100%, 100%. We've seen it actually also sometimes your bigger organizations will buy out the small competitors to force them to, and then they'll shelve the innovative idea, which is bad for the end user or the consumer. It's not so good. We've also seen in the South African context, some of our bigger players, what they'll do is they'll use their connections or their association with government to use legislation to limit how impactful these new entrants are so that the large monopoly can remain the large monopoly. I've also seen another example in America. So Microsoft, for example, I'm sure you know this. I've shared this in the induction. I probably did, but I'm a big video gamer. I do this a lot in my free time. That's what I do. I follow the news and stuff. Microsoft also they're in the gaming market, and what they do is they buy up a lot of the developers. And then they force those developers to put the video games on their platform. And what it's done is it's negatively affected Sony, which is their competitor. But that's literally an example of how you control new entrants, how you control the competition. Okay. But yeah, thanks. That's 100% correct. Thanks for sharing. The next thing that Porter said you must focus on is competitive rivalry. So competition is not a bad thing. It really isn't. It's good for business. It's good for the customer. It's good for your organization. It ensures that you remain optimized. It ensures that you're not slacking. You're not lazy. The problem is if we don't have competition and we're the only thing that the customers can rely on or use, it means that we kind of get lazy. We just are, they're only going to buy from us anyway. Why do we need to improve? Why do we need to innovate? Does service delivery really matter? And these things are important, okay, very important. If you want an organization to grow and to be the best it possibly can, competition will help you do that, okay? Then Porter says you need to focus on the buyer's power. So the people your consumers, what kind of power do they have? If they leave your organization, will it mean the end of your organization? And that is important. Your consumers must have some sort of power. And they should have choice. Choice is very important. If they're able to switch between suppliers, it's good for the market. It's good for competition. Yeah. And then also look at substitution. So Porter added substitutions in last, but in most cases, there are alternatives. Okay. Think about electricity in South Africa. There wasn't always affordable substitutions. And even now, the substitutions for electricity is not the cheapest. Dimakatsu, your hands up. Do you want to talk to me? Dimakatsu? Okay. Yeah, okay. So your substitutions are very important. If your customers have alternative options, it means you'll be performing as best as you can so that you can keep them there with you. And that's important. That's what you want. Okay, think about South Africa and how we now have alternatives to to coal-powered electricity, and it's been on the rise. This thing was boomed by the need, for electricity, and it became more important that we have substitutions, that we don't solely rely on one source of power. That kind of thing drives innovation, drives development of solutions. It's important. Okay. Let's look at module 5.2. 5.2, we will look at some of the acts, so Employment Equity Act and Companies Act. We'll also talk about customer feedback, and then I will share some team building models, and we'll just quickly talk about mentorship and leadership models. Okay, this one won't take too long. So the first thing we need to just tackle is the Employment Equity Act. So all I'm going to tell you about the Employment Equity Act is it's all about promoting equal opportunities, and being fair in the workplace. So you shouldn't be, discriminating against individuals in the workplace, and you should really be taking affirmative action. Okay, a big thing at the Information RIMS organization is we like to empower individuals. And regardless of who you are, you will be put to the test, and you're often left to kind of, you'll get thrown into the deep end, and you're meant to figure out how to swim and float. And it's good for growth and development. Okay, it might not be for everyone, but it's good generally for growth and development. The whole idea is to create diverse and inclusive workplaces, and then to also maintain compliance with legal standards to avoid penalties. So this compliance thing we've discussed at length. I'm going to keep pushing. So then we have the Companies Act. So the Companies Act is there to regulate the formation, operation, and dissolution of companies. Okay, remember, it's quite tricky to register a company. I mean, you can do it, but it's managing it is another thing. And then you have to do very specific things with financial reporting. There has to be audits. Duties and responsibilities have to be pointed out for directors. And it's quite a deal to manage. It's a lot more complicated than doing your sole trader or your partnerships. Okay, but it has an impact on business. The impact is that it ensures that there's as much transparency and accountability as possible, and then it will also try to protect your shareholders and the shareholders' interests as much as possible. Okay, so these are just these acts. The reason why they were included is because there are questions on the Employment Equity Act and there are questions on the Companies Act. Okay. Then we must talk about customer feedback. So Bill Gates was quoted as saying, "Your most unhappy customers are the greatest source of learning." And I like this quote because what Bill Gates says is we often run away from the negative feedback. We often run away from criticism. And that's just human instinct. We don't like to stand there and take negative feedback. But Bill Gates says you should actually listen to what the customers are saying, especially when they're unhappy, because they'll tell you where you need to improve. They'll tell you where you need to fix what you're doing. Okay, so Bill Gates is 100% correct. Don't avoid the criticisms. Okay, so there are many ways that you can get feedback from your customers. You can do surveys or questionnaires. You can do online reviews and ratings. You can do focus groups or interviews. Focus groups is where you have a small group of people come together and they'll specifically talk about a product, or they'll talk about the thing that you hand them. It could be, imagine it's a toy, for example. You give them a teddy bear, and how do you experience this teddy bear? Interviews is where you have conversations with them. It could be online, it could be face to face. And then you also have social media. Social media has become a great tool for collecting feedback. Okay, and also the nice thing about social media is people don't hold back. People often share their honest opinions, and that's what you want. You want an honest opinion when you're looking for feedback. Okay. The benefits of collecting or getting feedback from customers is that it will improve your product or service. Regardless of whether you're a private business or whether you're government, you must get feedback from the end user or the person who's receiving what you're delivering. You want to know where you can improve. And this is where I believe government and business can overlap. If government just treated this part of their model the same way, then they can really, hone in and improve. I don't see, feedback forms often enough. For example, they used to have a machine at Home Affairs where you could select how happy you were when you left. I don't think they have that anymore. I don't know. But those little things are very important. They must be incorporated. They must be included. And then you must always identify areas for improvement and innovation. So these feedback points will help you. Okay. And also, it doesn't matter that you go and you collect information and you do nothing with it. Okay. Asa, your hands up.
Actually, you just answered my question, because I was going to say it doesn't matter for you to collect all this information and do nothing about it, because the main thing is that what is it that you are learning out of the whole thing? And it also goes to show that you are taking serious the comments that you get from your customers. You are really looking into them in order to improve. And people, they will notice as you are taking their issues seriously, and that can actually bring you more customers than you realize.
100%. 100%. I've seen it with certain government departments. So some people will say, hey, rather go to this licensing department or rather go to this home affairs because they're faster, because they're more efficient, they're more communicative. Those things, that kind of feedback you want to have. And what you want to do is you want to take the things that work in these departments where people are giving positive feedback, and you want to try and apply them in the other departments where you're getting not so good feedback. So I think there is an opportunity for more overlap in this space, in the space of feedback for governments and feedback for businesses. There must be something that we can, where we can work it so that the feedback is actually implemented. But as you said, and as I've said, is the feedback means nothing if you do nothing with it. Okay. And also you must be cautious about how you interpret different types of feedback. So if you're you asking people about, if you put a scale and it says happy, sad, unhappy or whatever, if you're doing that kind of thing, that's going to be quantitative feedback, which means you need to then do a statistical analysis to see what the figures are saying. But if you're doing interviews and focus groups, which is this would be more qualitative feedback, which means you need to do thematic analysis and understanding that the analysis has an impact on the result, which would then impact how you action the feedback is important. Okay. So Asa, you're unmuted. Do you still want to talk?
Yeah, I agree with you, because if you are actually telling people what to do, it's actually if you are just open enough to let people say anything about you, you will improve in that regard. That's what I believe. And if you are channeling them to like the example that you just gave of saying, if you are happy, put 10%, and if you are not happy, less than 5%. I don't think that will be impactful.
Not at all. Not at all. The thing you would be able to determine if you put the scales in the different, let's say we were looking at South African Home Affairs, there's one in most towns. If you put that scale that tells you how happy people are, unhappy they are, the numbers, the statistics, you'd be able to tell which departments have leaving the consumers happy. You'd be able to tell which departments have unhappy consumers. That's the only thing you'd really be able to tell. It's not a lot of information, but it could tell us where we need to start fixing. So it might be that would be a prelim investigation, and then you can go and take it a step further by doing you can do something that's more qualitative, which would be a focus group or interview. Okay, but yeah, so I am getting a little bit technical about the research stuff, but research is where I shine. It's one of my favorite things to discuss. And I like setting it up and trying to set the tools up in a way that you get the most feedback out of it. And a lot of people don't know that there's a cause and effect in terms of how you set it up. But yeah, the feedback means nothing if we don't set it up properly and if we don't use it to actually make improvements. Okay. Let me keep going. So then, yeah, so I've given you the steps to implement feedback, and these are just general steps, generic steps. You don't need to take these. You can take it and use it as a starting point. But the first step is to, collect the data. And when I say collect, I mean set up your tool, your data collection tool, so that you're collecting the type of evidence you require to answer the question that you have. And then analyze the feedback, and your analysis must be relevant. You can't go and do interviews or focus groups and then do statistical analysis. It doesn't make sense. Okay, you can't do statistical analysis with word feedback or spoken feedback. You need to do thematic analysis. You're looking for key themes. There's a difference. And it has an impact on how the result will come out. Then once you've identified key trends and issues, you can start developing an action plan for the improvement. So we can start corrective measure to fix the areas that are falling short. And then also to show the customer that their feedback is important, you communicate these changes. You as public and as loudly as possible, you say, we've noted these issues. These are the things we will be doing to fix it. Okay. Now I want to just show you some team building models, which is very important for this module because this is about team building. My favorite team building model has got to be Tuckman's team building model. Okay, Tuckman says that all teams will go through this life cycle where they'll form, they'll storm, they'll norm, they'll perform, and then they'll adjourn. And the reason why I like Tuckman's model so much is because it rhymes. You have the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, or adjourning. It depends how you want to pronounce it. Adjourning doesn't rhyme with the rest, but it's forced. Okay, but the key thing is when a team forms, on day one, once it's in formation, there's gonna be little agreement. There's gonna be a lack of guidance and direction. Things are gonna be unclear, and it's actually quite uncomfortable when you first form a team. A lot of people find it uncomfortable. I kind of enjoy it. I like watching people uncomfortable. Yeah, and then you have your storming, and the storming is got to be the second most important step in it, and that's why it's second. But what Tuckman has noticed is there's going to be a little bit of conflict. It's not going to be like an argument per se. It's going to be more debate. It can be an argument, but it will be. It's again, it's uncomfortable. It's increasing that discomfort from the forming. But what happens as a result of the storm of this conflict is you start developing a clearer sense of purpose. And there will be a power struggle. There will be people arguing to be leaders, unless a leader is just selected. Sometimes your storming stage is easy. Someone just says, I'll be the leader, and then you're done. It's easy. But if you don't have that, there will be a bit of a power struggle. But once you get past this point, you can get to the normalization stage or the phase, which is norming, where we have an agreement, a general consensus is formed. There is clear roles and responsibilities. And you can see that we move away from this coaching thing in the storming, and we move into a space of facilitation, which means your leader is there to make things easier for those who have to action and implement. Okay. So yes, so you start from forming, where it's uncomfortable, there's little agreement. You go straight into an argument, where things are rough, it's chaotic, but you start getting clarity. Once the clarity is formed, you can start normalizing, which means agreements can be reached, clear roles and responsibilities defined, and then you can go to the next step, which is performing. Once you're performing, it means the whole team, everyone on the team knows exactly what they have to do. They have a sense of purpose, and they know what the goal is. So they're all focused. And you'll see that in this stage, it's more about delegation. So the team members take their parts and then they do what they have to do. And then at the end, once the task is complete, there's a good feeling about it. There's a sense of achievement. And the leader often gives some recognition. It's very important that the leader does that. But you have adjourning, which means the team breaks apart. They're finished. They've done what they had to do. Now, a little bit of an anecdote. I experienced this model firsthand. And I did so when I was doing my honors degree. They had us do group work. And I remember I was about to get on a plane, and I told my teammates, 5 of us, I told the other 4 teammates that I haven't seen the summative. We're working on a summative. I told them that they must select the questions, and then I'll select whatever's left over. I got off the plane after the flight, and I saw that the team had taken all the questions. There was no questions for me to take. And then I said, okay, it's fine. I can see there's no questions to take. What I will do is I'll work individually with all the team members, and I will collect all the responses. I'll compile it. I'll quality assure it. I'll add references, and I'll submit it for the team. And that's exactly what I did. When there's no role for you, you find a role. You carve your role out. And what I did there, I was facilitating, so I was making it easier for the team, so they didn't have to worry about coordination, collection, management, submission, any of that, or even quality. So the whole idea was collect the response, add a little bit here and there, put it together, submit, and it worked really well. We got about a 90% for that submission. But that's what Tuckman's model does. That's if you follow the principles, it works very well. There are other models. There's Balpin's team roles model. So Balpin says that every team needs one of these. Every team needs a thinker, every team needs an actioner, and every team needs a people person. Okay. In your thinking category, you have your plant, which is the person who comes up with the ideas. You have your monitor evaluator. So this is people that monitor, they keep checks on things. And then you have your specialists. Often I fall into the space of thinking specialists. I can come up with very cool plans. I can make things look very good. And then you have your actioners. So these would be implementers. So it'd be people who take things and run with them. You'd have shapers. So these are people that make sure that things are quality assured, that they meet the requirements, that they're compliant. Then you have your completers or your finishers. And these are people who are good at coming in at the end of a project or whatever you're doing and just like, pushing it over that last hurdle. And then you have your people. So these are research investigators, sorry, resource investigators. So they're very good at finding people when you need. If you need a facilitator, yeah, this person will help you. If you need some sort of supplier for this thing, this person knows a person. Then you have your coordinators. So coordinators are good at directing the team, making sure there's flow. And then you have your team workers. So people who are there to support the thinkers and the actioners. Okay, BAL6's team role says that when you have a team, people will often tick one of these boxes, and that will be the role they'll perform. There's very little room for overlap, so you can't really have an overlapping role. But what you will see in the overlapping areas is would become in the form of collaboration. So your implementer could, collaborate with your specialist, so that your specialist comes up with a plan, the implementer drives and actions the plan. That sort of thing that's what we're looking for in BAL6's model. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. Okay, then this is my model. Well, it's a model that I took a step further. So this comes from Honey and Mumford's model, and it's a learning model. And it literally says you have activists, reflectors, pragmatists, theorists. And what Honey and Mumford says, this also comes from I think it's Kotler. It's Kotler initially, then Honey and Mumford added to it, and then I've added to it also. But what they believe is when you learn, you have to have the concrete experience, you have to have the reflective observation, you have to have the abstract conceptualization, which is like drawing conclusions from what you've experienced. And then you must also have active experimentation with what you've learned. So taking what you've learned and putting it into practice. The model also says that you have different types of learners. So you have activists. Activists are people who like to go in, and what they'll do is they'll just open like if they have to assemble a table, they'll open the box and start putting the table together without even thinking about it. Okay. Your reflectors, on the other hand, are people who think about past experiences, or they think about stories they heard from other people, and how they experienced building that table before they start building. Okay, then you have your theorists, and your theorist asks, why are we building the table? Where's the table going to go? How am I going to use the table? Why does it have to be here? Why are we assembling it that way? Your theorist asks a lot of why questions, and they could be a little annoying for your activists. And then you have your pragmatists. Your pragmatists would always be the individuals that read the instructions and they follow it step by step. They're very logical, very concise. They do fall on the side of doers and implementers, but they follow it step by step. They follow the book to the T. Okay. What I did is I divided this. So I believe your reflectors and your theorists would be very good for building plans, for planning, for thinking. And then I believe that your activists and pragmatists would be really good at implementing. So if you can identify who on your team falls in which area, you can use them strategically. You can have your reflectors build the plan, and you can have your activists and pragmatists implement that plan. Okay. So in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. I'm running out of time. We have mentorship and leadership. So Ronald Reagan, former president, said, the greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He's the one who gets people to do the greatest things. And I like the quote because it literally means you're only as good as your people are. You're only as good as how you've mentored and led the people. Okay. You'll see that mentorship is a structured relationship aimed at personal and professional development. As someone who mentors a lot of people, I have a lot of mentees that report to me often. We don't always talk about work things. Sometimes there will be a personal discussion. And the key thing which I try to teach is how we can manage the personal issues with also the professional issues and finding that balance. You'll see that there are many different models that you can use in leadership. We have transformational, transactional, servant leadership, situational. Transformational is all about inspiring and motivating followers. Transactional focuses on routine and established procedures, but it also strongly associates itself with the reward and punishment system. Then you have your servant leadership. So these are the leaders that work for the people, meeting the needs of the individuals. Then you have situational leadership, which is a leadership style that's very adaptive. It will adjust according to what the situation requires. Okay. Then there are many benefits. So for mentees, it would be personalized guidance and support. It could be enhanced skills and career development. For mentors, it's the opportunity to assist someone with the growth and opportunity. There is also a major and immense amount of satisfaction from helping others. And then for an organization, it's important for organizations. It means that Carl has the opportunity to share what he knows with employees within the organization. That is important. That means that I can take my skills and knowledge and share it with others, which is what I want to do. I hate the thought of being someone the only one who knows how to do things. I like the idea of being able to empower those around me so that they can implement when I'm not around. Okay. So key takeaways would be that, so this is from today, key takeaways from the discussion. We spoke about the integration of legal compliance, improving customer satisfaction, teamwork, developing strong leadership qualities. We also looked at practical implication. I try to give a lot of anecdotes, a lot of references to real world situations. We also spoke about the environment, so the micro, macro, meso environments, which is very important. And then we dabbled on continuous improvement, so try and improve in all of these areas. Okay, so that is basically the end of today's session. I will not be covering the workbook or the summative. I think it's quite simple. They're already on the platform, so you can go through, you can read the questions, you can cover them yourself. If you have any questions about the questions, you're always welcome to reach out. Okay, I would recommend that you reach out directly via email. It is easier. I had to change the system. So back last week and the weeks before, I was getting emails about everyone who was using the platform, which is a problem. So anyone who did anything on Google Classrooms, I would get an email about. So even other facilitators, other groups, when they were marking, I'd get an email, which meant like on a day, I could easily get 500 emails, which means if you sent me an email, I'd miss it. So what I did is I created a separate email. It's called IOG, I think Master Mail. So all of the Google activities will go there. Your coordinators will keep checking to see, checking the platform to see if you have any questions or queries. But if you have anything that you feel is unaddressed, email me directly. Then I'll do my very best to respond to it in a timely manner. Okay, so that is the end of our Module 5 lecture. I hope you're all good. Give me a thumbs up if we're happy. Asa?
Well,
Yes.
you said that there is this other technological
Oh, yes,
thing
that I
that you have
wanted to.
discovered that, yes.
Can I demo it?
Okay. Yeah.
Asa, can you do me a favor? Just type in the chat something that you wanted to say. Make it like a sentence.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and then I'll quickly just open it up. Okay, I will share a link to it also, and I'll explain how it works and all of that. Okay, so for those of us who are interested, you're welcome to stick around. So I'm just logging in. Okay, have you typed in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to check now. Okay, let me share my screen. I made a mistake. It's fine, I'll fix it. Okay, let's just put this bigger. It's just a little slow. I don't know why. Sometimes my computer, it just deals with too much. So I'm going to share my audio. It's very important. So what I can do, okay. Okay, so I'll show you this. So this is, it literally converts text to spoken word. So what it's going to do is it's going to generate it. And what I've done is I've selected the South African voice, but I'll show you a proper.
The technological innovation that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, so this is an AI that's talking. I'll show you.
The technological innovation that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, so but I'll show you another example. Okay, so if I go create a new file, I'll just do this. And then if I go podcast, okay. Now when I play the podcast for you, just remember that this is not a real human. This is not like this is a computer. Okay. Let it generate and it will play.
Hey
now.
everyone, welcome to Beyond the Visible. I'm your host Alex, and this podcast is going to be like a deep dive into the universe and all its mysteries. So, have you ever looked up at the stars and thought, what's like out there that we're not seeing today? We're going to talk about something that's kind of mind blowing dark matter. Yeah, it sounds super sci-fi, right? But trust me, by the end of this, you'll be like totally hooked on the whole idea. So strap in, or just get comfy and let's venture into, well, the unknown.
Okay, but now I want to change the accent. I don't think it's relevant to us in South Africa. So they have a South African accent, which is what I discovered the other day while I was doing a talk about AI in education. And this blew my mind because it sounds like a South African individual. Obviously a very certain type, but not, this won't take the requirement for South African for everyone. But let's listen to it and tell me what you think. Give it a second.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Visible. I'm your host Alex, and well, this podcast is going to be like a deep dive into the universe and all its mysteries. So, have you ever looked up at the stars and thought, what's like out there that we're not seeing today? We're going to talk about something that's kind of mind-blowing dark matter. Yeah, it sounds super sci-fi, right? But trust me, by the end of this, you'll be like totally hooked on the whole idea. So strap in, or just get comfy and let's venture into, well, the unknown.
Yeah, so what do you think about that? This is just tech. Any ideas?
No, it's quite remarkable, and especially when you hear something that you can resonate with, if you get hooked, and you will follow everything that is it's among you generate interest by just looking for something that you can resonate with.
100%. 100%. So what I've done is I've put the link for the software because it's free to use for a certain amount of words. Like you have, I think, 12,000 words for free that you can generate, and then you must pay for the account. Just play around with it. It's very cool technology. I think it's really interesting. And I appreciate the fact that they created a South African accent. They didn't have to. It's not a South African company, but they did it. Yeah, awesome. Okay, with that being said, thank you everyone for attending today. We will see you tomorrow night if you want to attend another session. The session will be lectured by Brian, one of our in-house facilitators. He is a sharp, bright mind. So if you're interested if you missed anything, hop on that session, listen to Brian, engage him, prompt his thoughts and ideas. Okay, thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy.